welcome back to Introduction to Research Methodology. See you again in part 2, Research Process. Okay, the objective of the lesson is to provide an overview of the criteria that define good research, highlighting the interconnected nature of the research process. The research process involves multiple closely related activities such as formulating the research problem, conducting a literature survey, developing a hypothesis, preparing a research design, collecting data, and analyzing results. Each step influences the others, requiring anticipation of subsequent needs. And the lesson outlines key stages in conducting research, emphasizing the importance of maintaining high standard throughout, from hypothesis testing to final report preparation, to ensure the integrity and quality of the research study. Okay, so the outline of this lesson is a quick glance to research process, the criteria of good research, and quality of good research. So if you have a quick glance, the research process actually have the 11 step. So before embarking on the detail of research methodology and techniques, it seems appropriate to present a brief overview of the research process. So research process consists of theories of action or steps necessarily to effectively carry out research and the desired sequencing of these steps. Have a look at this step of the research process. Okay, if you look at these 7 steps, you see the first is you have to define the research problem. And what does it mean by research problem? It will be explained in the next part. So having defined the research problem, and then you move to the second step, you conduct the literature review or review of the literature, in which you review the concepts and theories. Also, you review the previous research findings, what they have already done and what's their finding. Third, you have to formulate the hypothesis, or you may not have the hypothesis formulated. It depends. And having formulated your hypothesis, you move to the next step, in which you design your research, including sampling design. Having designed your research, you go and collect the data. After you collected the data, and then you prepare for analysis the data, or you test hypothesis if you have developed or formulated the hypothesis. And last, you interpret the data and write your report and submit to your supervisor or to the faculty. Well, if you go to a bit further detail, we look at the 11-step model for the research. Step 1, formulating the research problem. Step 2, extensive literature review. Step 3, you develop the hypothesis. Step 4, preparing the research design. Step 5, determining sampling design or sample design. Step 6, collecting the data. Then 7, execution of the project. Later, step 8, the analysis of data. And 9, you test the hypothesis. After testing the hypothesis, you generalization and interpretation. Finally, preparation for the report or presentation of the results. Okay, Formulating the research problem. So formulating the research problem is the first step in research, involving understanding the issue and defining it in specific analytical terms. So researchers must narrow down a broad topic, and you consult experts and review relevant literature to clarify the problem and identify available data. A well-defined problem guides the research design, the data collection, and final report, ensuring relevance and clarity throughout the process. So in step two, you conduct the literature review. So once the research problem is formulated, then write a brief summary and submit it for approval. If you have the supervisor or the mentor, and then you have to ask for the approval. Then you conduct thorough literature review by using academic journals, books, and other relevant sources to understand existing research and identify gaps. A well-equipped library, yeah, if you have a very good library, will be essential in finding credible resources and guiding research direction. Step 3, developing the hypothesis. So after the literature review, you state the hypothesis, assumption to test its consequences. So it guides the research, focusing on key suspects and influencing data analysis methods. Develop the hypothesis through discussions with experts, examining data, reviewing similar studies, and conducting exploratory investigations. While not always necessary, remember again, it's not always necessary to have a hypothesis in your study. So while not always necessary for exploratory research, a clear, precise working hypothesis is crucial for most studies. Step 4, preparing the research design. After formulating the research problem, prepare a research design outlining the structure for conducting the study. This design ensures efficient data collection with minimal effort, time, and cost, depending on the research purpose. Example like exploration, description, and diagnosis, or experimentation. The design can be experimental or non-experimental and should consider factors like data collection measures, research skills, time, and budget. So it is very important when you design, you have to think about the factors. How can you collect the data? What is your skill, your expertise, or your major? And think about the time as well as budget, because collecting the data you might need to spend your pocket money, but if you're lucky you get supported from some other donors or funds. So choosing the right design will help minimize reliability and minimize bias in research process. Step 5, determining sample design. So determining sample design involves selecting a subset from the population for study, as a complete census is often impractical due to time, cost, and potential bias. So census is not that easy for us because it takes time as well as it costly, because you need to gather and collect the data from all. Okay, a simple design is a planned method for selecting a sample, which can be either probability sample or a non-probability sample. So probability sample is where each element has a known chance of selection, and a non-probability sample is where this probability is unknown. Probability sample includes methods like random, certified, and cluster sampling, while a non-probability sample include convenient, judgment, and quota sampling. So for more detail, we're gonna learn and discuss in class about what is random, how, and certify, clustering sampling, as well as convenient sampling, judgment, or quota sampling. Okay, determining the sample design, you need to follow the steps such as deliberate sampling, simple random sampling, a systematic sampling, certified sampling, coded sampling, cluster sampling, and area sampling, or can be multiple stage sampling and sequential sampling, whatever. We will discuss more in the class. All right, step 6, collecting the data. When solving real problems, the data we have is often not enough. So we need to collect more. This can be done in different ways depending on the time, the cost, and resources. Primary data can be gathered through experiments where measurements are taken to test a hypothesis, or through surveys, which offer several ways to collect the data by observation, interview, telephone interview, or you can email the questionnaire. And recently, you can drop them the link through the Telegram or whatever social media that is commonly used, and also throughout the schedules. Well, step 7, execution of the project. So executing the project is a key to ensuring reliable data. It should be done systematically and on time. So if you think structured questionnaires, so data can be machine processed with the questions and answers coded. Interviews must be carefully selected and trained with the field checks to ensure quality. The survey should remain accurate and realistic, addressing issues like non-response by targeting a subsample of non-respondents for follow-up. Step 8, analysis of data. After data collection, the researcher analyzes the data by categorizing, by coding, and tabulating. The raw data is organized into manageable groups and transferred into symbols for counting. So editing improves data quality before coding, and tabulating arrange the data into the tables. So often we use computers for efficiency. Analysis involves computing percentages, coefficients, and applying statistic formulas to test hypotheses. For example, statistic tests can determine whether differences between two sample means are significant or due to chance. Similarly, analysis of variance can be used to assess difference across multiple groups. In summary, various statistical methods help the researcher draw valid conclusions from the data. Okay, hypothesis testing. After analyzing the data, researchers test the hypothesis to see if the facts support them. This involves using statistical tests like chi-square test, t-test, or f-test, depending on the research objectives. Hypothesis testing will either accept or reject the hypothesis. So if no hypothesis was formulated initially, then the database generalization can be proposed as hypothesis for the future research. In step 10, generalization and interpretation. If a hypothesis is repeatedly supported, researcher may develop a generalization or theory. So the true value of research lies in ability to establish this generalization. So if no initial hypothesis existed, so researcher may interpret the finding based on existing theory. So the interpretation can raise new questions leading to further research. Step 11. So the last step of your research is preparation for the report or presentation of the results. Finally, researcher has to prepare the report of what has been done by him or herself. Writing a report must be done with the great care, keeping in view. So now we look at the criteria of good research. What make good research? Good research is categorized by several key criteria that ensure its quality, relevance, and reliability. So these criteria have to evaluate the rigor or validity of the research study. Scientific research is expected to meet specific criteria to ensure its rigor and validity. Here are some common recognized criteria of good research. They are clearly define the purpose and common concepts. You detail the research procedure and then carefully plan procedural design. You frank reporting of flaws, adequate data analysis, conclusion based on the data, and researchers' experience, reputation, and integrity. Okay, that's all for our lessons. I'll see you in the class and we will discuss more on the research.